Hey, what's going on, everyone? I'm Christian Carter with Radius Financial Group, and today we are talking about equity, right? So, more importantly, the equity within your home. And we're going to answer two questions. What the heck is equity? And then, more importantly, how do I get it? All right, so let's get started here. First up, equity. What the heck is it? In layman's terms, in simplest terms, equity is essentially how much of your home you actually own. So, for a quick example, if you have a home that's worth $100,000 and you have a mortgage balance on there of $80,000, you have $20,000 worth of equity within that property, right? So that's the first part of the video. That was the easy part. All right. Now we're gonna figure out how do we get it, right? And there's more ways than this, but there's four ways in particular that I'm gonna go over. First two on the top, very boring. The bottom two, very exciting. All right, so let's get right into it. First way to get equity within a property or a home, you pay for it, right? So just like it sounds, you pay for the equity up front in terms of a down payment, right? So think about it like this. Let's say you own a home that has a fair amount of equity and you want to sell that home and buy a new home, right? You would probably use the proceeds from the sale of that first home to use as a big down payment for the next home, right? So you have a large chunk of equity that you've paid for via down payment in that next property, right? Like I said, very straightforward, very simple to understand, but we're going to go over a quick example here, right? So let's say you buy a home for $100,000 and you make a $20,000 down payment. Your mortgage is going to be $80,000, which means you have $20,000 in equity in that home that you paid for up front, right? So that's it. Pay for it. That's how you get it. Next on the list, you wait for it. This is probably even more boring than paying for it, right? But we're going to go over it anyway. Essentially, two things happen when we're waiting for equity. We're paying down the mortgage balance and we're letting natural appreciation take place to make the home worth more. So two things are happening. We're paying down the mortgage balance, so we owe less and less and less on that property every year. And then hopefully we get natural appreciation somewhere between 3 to 4%. I know we lived through crazy times between the mortgage meltdown of 2008 and the Great Recession, and then the last couple of years, homes have just skyrocketed in appreciation. However, let's use a pretty conservative figure that natural appreciation is going to be about 3% to 4% annually, right? So here's a quick example of how you wait to build equity in your home. So year one, you buy a home for $100,000. Your mortgage balance, let's say you did 100% financing, you didn't make a down payment. So you owe $100,000 on that home that's worth $100,000. You have $0 in equity for year one. Let's fast forward 10 years, right? Now your home is worth roughly $149,000. And basically what I use is just 4% annually where the house is appreciating every year, right? After year 10, your mortgage balance is $81,000 because like we talked about, every single year you paid that mortgage balance down lower and lower and lower while the home's value went higher and higher. So after year 10, you've got about $68,000 in total equity. And again, this is just, combining mortgage pay down and natural appreciation. All right, now for the good stuff. This is for the exciting stuff. You can create equity, right? And when you're thinking about creating equity, think of fix and flippers or think of all those HGTV shows that throw around all those crazy probably fake numbers. But here's the gist of it, right? So in order to create equity, you've got to buy a distressed property, so a crappy property. You then need to fix or renovate that property, making that property or home worth much more than it was, right? And this is what we call forced appreciation. So instead of natural appreciation and letting the market just slowly, in some cases slowly, appreciate naturally over time, we are forcing appreciation with this example. Speaking of examples, so here's the deal. You buy a home for $100,000, right? you make $30,000 worth of renovations, hopefully adding a bedroom, kitchen, things like that. Adding a bedroom and improving the kitchen and things like that. The home is now worth $150,000. So you bought it for 100, you made 30 grand worth of renovations. So you're in this property for 130 grand. It's now worth 150 grand. So that means you've got $20,000 in equity. This is a really, really good way to create equity in a somewhat short time frame. All right, last one and the most exciting. You find it. Now, this is also the most difficult. You find equity, right? So what does that mean? You find a property that is selling for less than it's worth. I know a lot of people are going to say, yeah, that's impossible. Well, it's not. It's very, very, very difficult to do this, but it is definitely possible. So ways that we see people find equity in property, this is probably the biggest one, friends and family. So when family members sell homes or properties to other family members, they're usually doing at a discounted rate, right? So that's an easy way where you can find equity. Other ways, there can be properties that are mislabeled on the MLS. For example, a property has been up on the MLS for a while, marketed as a 2-bedroom. In reality, it's really a 3 or 4 bedroom. That would probably allow you to find some equity right off the bat. You can always, well, you can't always, but maybe you find a property where you can subdivide the land, right? So maybe the previous owner never did the legwork to actually see if they could subdivide their property and sell that other lot as a buildable lot. That's another great way. Other uses for the property, this is pretty much open-ended. I mean, you've got crazy things like putting a cell phone tower on there, water rights, roof rights. So that's kind of open-ended with other uses for the property. You got to get creative. And then when we're thinking about finding equity, think about wholesalers, right? So this is basically the job of wholesalers, is to find properties that are going to sell for less than they're worth. So I'm sure a lot of us are familiar with those WeBuyUglyHouses.com and the billboards and things like that. They are essentially wholesalers, right? That's what they do. They go out and they find properties and pay less than what they're worth. I don't really think we need to go into an example, but we're going to do it anyway. So here's a quick example. You buy a home for $80,000. The home is worth $100,000. So that means you've got $20,000 in equity that you just found. What's really cool is when you can combine all 4 of these, which is extremely difficult, right? But I'm just doing this kind of to illustrate a point here, right? So let's say, for example, you buy a home for $80,000 that's worth 100 grand, right? You then put $30,000 worth of renovations into that property. Let's say you also make a $20,000 down payment. And then in 10 years, your total equity would be 68 plus 20 plus 20 plus 20. So we're talking about $128,000 in equity if you found it, you created it, you paid for it, and then you waited for it. That's just a quick example. It's going to be pretty difficult to find a property like that, but that is essentially what equity is and how you get equity. If you have any more questions, I love making these videos. Please hit me up with different topics, and I will see you later. See ya.